Hi, I'm Fred, and I wanted to talk more about the Gabby Petito Brian laundry case. I had some more thoughts since I last shared a video. There's so many disparate facts that are kind of floating out there that we've learned, lots of theories, but it's one of those like kind of puzzles you can't put together. And you have a free-spirited, beautiful young woman and a guy who seemed pretty free-spirited too, and both of them going out as many people do to see America and have an adventure, and then something's happened, and we hear about all these kind of strange things that we can't really make sense of. It's like being in a theater and watching a mystery movie, some sort of like drama or mystery where maybe a whodunit where you're getting all these little fractions of information, and then all of a sudden the reel stops, like the movie stops because there's a problem in the theater, and then you have to walk out of the theater and you're like, I can't even quite put any of that stuff together. I know by the end of the movie I would, but right now it doesn't make any sense to me. Okay, so one example of something that's just so bizarre to me is in the middle of a trip across the country when they're driving together. Once they get to Salt Lake City, Brian puts Gabby up in the Fairfield Hotel near the airport, and then flies home to Florida for 6 days. So that means Gabby was sitting in the hotel for 6 days. And I should add that that hotel stay that Gabby had at the Fairfield Inn was from the 17th of August to the 24th of August. Then Brian Laundrie flew back into Salt Lake City, as far as we know. Now, I'm completely speculating here, but I wouldn't be surprised if Brian took the keys to her van. And the reason I say that is, he has such controlling features, it seems like, that he might have done something like that. And if you look at some of the things that occurred, the little bit that we know that occurred while she was in the hotel, one of the things she did is she called her dad so her dad could use some sort of dining app to have a pizza delivered to the hotel. So what I can tell you is I've stayed in the La Quinta Inn right in that same area. It's just down the street on West Wiley Post Road, which is near kind of the intersections of Wright Brothers Drive and Interstate 80. And it's really a light industrial area. It's not like you're going to walk around and find restaurants around there. So for Gabby to have to order a pizza, or maybe she didn't have to, but the fact that she did just seems odd to me. Calling her dad to do that when she had money in her account, which we know Brian used later, and then she had a van, her own van, at her disposal. So that makes me think she didn't have her van at her disposal, that Brian had snuck off with the keys when he flew home. Another question I have is, what exactly did Gabby Petito do on the 12th, on the evening of the 12th, when Brian was taken by the police to the motel? She had the van, and where did she go exactly? Some people have even theorized that maybe she had met those two women who got shot in the LaSalle mountain range, just I think it's southeast of Moab, and maybe she had met them and talked with them and maybe disclosed something that later Brian found out, and that's how they died. I think the police seem to have debunked the idea that Brian could be involved with those two women's murders. But the question is, what did Gabby do? And for how long? They ended up at the Fairfield Hotel, or she did, on the 17th. So you have the evening of the 12th, the 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th. It only takes from Moab, let me think about this. I've never driven, yes I have. It takes about 5 or 6 hours if I remember, because I once flew into Salt Lake City and then drove to Moab using, I think I rented an excursion or something. And it was raining hard, but it took maybe 5 hours. So I'd have to you can check on Google Maps, see how long it takes, but you could do that in one day. So the question is, what exactly did they do in those interim? Did Brian stay at the hotel for more than one night? Did Gabby meet some other people, hung out with him? Was Brian afraid or later infuriated that he found out that Gabby had been talking maybe about their relationship and the abuse that she was receiving? So he might have been angry at what might have been disclosed to somebody, because when they are then later, after she stays at the Fairfield, they're up in Jackson, Wyoming, in the little town of Jackson, and they're at that Mexican restaurant. I think that's on the 25th. That he is explosive with the hostess, with the people working there, and she's crying out on the curb, and he's running in and out of the restaurant, berating the people working there. Something in that interim has to have really triggered him, right? So one of my theories, like I said, is maybe there's something that there's some kind of contact that she had with somebody else that made him feel really either insecure or infuriated, or both. So it's one of those things, again, part of these puzzle pieces that are just like, there's so much detail missing, that we don't know, that makes it so interesting. And then, of course, there's the piece that's related to all of this, which is, how does anyone, meaning Brian Laundrie, leave his love, the love of his life, laying next to a river and drive home? I mean, any person who has empathy probably wouldn't be able to live even at night thinking that she's in the middle of the cold, her body's in the middle of the cold at night. It's unbelievable. And I mentioned that in my other video. Whether, it's possible, there's always these slim chances that maybe they got in a fight and she walked off. He didn't know what happened to her, or that he abandoned her somewhere and took off and he didn't know what happened to her. But the point is, it's like impossible for us to think that any of us who have loved ones, that we would just leave them somewhere and not even check on them. Oh, my sprinklers just came on, so I'll speak a little louder, just in case you can't hear me. So I think the reason I brought all of this up tonight is because, kind of going with the opening theme that I have, that people are really curious and captivated by things that they can't quite put together. So you have all these disparate bits of information that don't make sense either logistically or emotionally for any of us. And that's the fact that it's actually both of those two in this case is just so strange. You can't empathize with Brian Laundrie in this case at all, and you can't really, without knowing the whole trip and what was going on, it still doesn't make sense. You just know that he must have gotten infuriated about something, but then how he left her and drove 2,300 miles back home, as I just said, is insane. It just seems insane to me. So within the same theme of things that we can't put together, I wanted to bring up another case which most of you are probably peripherally familiar with, even if you don't know the case really intimately. The case is about two Dutch women who, after being graduated from university in the Netherlands, decided to take at least one of their postgraduate trips. I'm not sure if it was the only one or the first one, or among some others. I think it was the only one they did together. It was the first one they did together, and one of them had already taken a trip somewhere. Anyways, they went down to Panama, and their names were Kremers and Lisanne Froon. And what happened was, they ended up in a little village called Bouquet. I think one of them at least was going to teach some English to some students there as a way to make money while they were traveling. Before they were able to start the work, and which I think was actually going to be delayed for some reason, they decided to kind of see the countryside there. One of the things they did is they went on a hike. It was called El Pianista Trail, which went from the village up to the peak of a nearby mountain. I think it probably took maybe between 1 and 2 hours at the most. And you get to the top, you can see the ocean from there. It's supposed to be a beautiful sight when the weather's clear. Well, at the top there's some signs that say don't continue to the other side. It's a little more wild there. There's some Aboriginal cultures there, and the tourists are really just meant to stay on the, I guess it would be like the south side, the side facing the Pacific Ocean. So they did go down the other side. After they kind of started going down the other side, they just were never heard from again. And then within a few months, their backpack with maybe a water bottle, a camera, a cell phone, a bra, I think one of the shirts, I'm not sure if one of the shirts they were wearing, but I know one of the bras they were wearing, which you can see in some of the photos that they've taken on their cell phone, they were found pretty far down the other side of the mountain. And then after that, some of their remains, their body remains, were found even further down. And we're just talking about just a few remains. It was strange because it was so far from where the top of the hill was. And they would have known, I would think, that they weren't going down the same side. It just, they wouldn't have recognized the same areas. They're probably, anybody would normally just go back up the hill and figure out, okay, where did I start from, So the reason I bring this up in regard with, like, Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie is that Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon's case, kind of like Gabby's and Brian's, is kind of frozen right now in this place. Kris and Lisanne's is frozen permanently, as far as we can assume. It's in this place where there's all these pieces of information, they don't make sense, and it's just never been solved. That was 2014 that happened, by the way. So let me give you a couple of examples of the weird bits of information from Kris and Lisanne's case. So one of the really strange things was the police were able to kind of data mine Kris and Lisanne's phones. I don't know, I think only one was found. I'd have to read the material again online, but I believe one phone was found. I don't think the other was, but they were able to figure out that as they were hiking, like they passed the peak and were hiking down the wrong side, where you can see a waterfall and there's a few things that are, I'm sure very pretty. Around, I think it was like 4 o'clock that day, there was an attempt made to call their version of 911 in Panama. And then after that one call, nothing until the next morning. And then they started trying again. And this went on for 11 days, like not connecting. It was bad service. But it was just, calls like intermittently, and the phones were shut off after that. And then it would turn on again. It was like for 11 days. Then the other weird part of it is it looked like no attempts of like texting out to friends, family, help, anything were ever tried. And you'd think two young women would it's the first thing they would do is text, I think with text, it's a good idea in an emergency situation, because if you can't make a connection with a solid line, a telephone line, one of the things that happens is a text will kind of sit in a kind of holding bin of your phone, and when it does connect, it can like shoot out, and it could just be a few seconds of connection, and then maybe you lose the connection again, but at least that text goes out. But it's strange they just never made any attempts to text at all. Okay, another example, and it's the facts of this case that just, I think, freak a lot of people out when they hear or see this, which is the camera that was found. That was, I think, Lisanne Froon's camera. It was a little more than a point and shoot camera, but I don't think it was a full DSLR. I'm not sure, but it's easy to find out online. It was like kind of like, not a full frame Canon or Nikon, but it was also not just a simple point and shoot. It was somewhere in between there. Well, anyways, the camera, when they pulled the card out, had lots of photos as they were hiking up, like even the days before, they were eating with people at the ocean, doing stuff. And then it was all, lots of photos on the hike until they got to the top of the peak. They came down the other side a little bit for maybe an hour part of that hike, got to a waterfall that people know where it is. And after that, there's just no more photos. But that's not the weird thing. The really weird thing is that a few days later, because these photos were time-stamped and dated stamped, there's like something like 80 photos taken at night with a flash that just show mostly darkness with maybe a little shrubbery around. Now, you'll have to see these online. It is just so weird. It makes the hair stand up on my head when I think about this. That somebody, one of them or somebody, maybe somebody got the camera. Maybe they were being chased. Maybe they got injured and fell. Maybe they're trying to signal with a flash to somebody somewhere. But these photos are kind of like taken, they're taken close enough together that somebody online was able to like piece, as if you like took a photo here and there and there and there and there. Somebody's able to piece them together, lot them together to make a picture, but it's just still like shrubbery, trees, and the blackness of night. So it's so bizarre, So that's why I say, like, these cases like this are just so fascinating, because with Kris and Lisanne's case, it's kind of like a no-go at this point. I don't think they'll ever find out exactly what happened. It's just been too long. It was a country that doesn't really do a lot of good forensic, checking, I think, and also the rule of law only is in certain places. So they could have been, chased down by some other tourists or Aboriginal people who live there, or whatever, locals. There's a lot of drug trafficking through that area. So nobody will really ever know. I hope they will. And I hope someday somebody will say something, but who knows? I just want to add, too, that there's a woman named Scarlett, who's a Dutch woman, who has written extensively about the case of Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon. I'll put the link below, right in the description here. It's a great blog site. I mean, I think she probably has done the most work on, both evidence and hearsay and everything about the case. So as soon as you click on that site, good luck going to sleep. You're going to be reading till 4 a.m. Sorry about that. But anyways, kind of wrapping all this up, I want to be clear that I have the most respect for Gabby Petito's family, parents, her friends who love her, everybody in her life. By saying that, we're captivated by these cases, it sounds like we're all voyeurs. I think all of us who care about this case every single one of us wishes we could have been somewhere in Moab or in Jackson and just touched her shoulder and said, Gabby, just come with us, just get away from him, anything we could have done to have saved her. So I don't mean to like belittle or anything our interest in these types of cases just because we can't put the pieces together. But I think it is that human nature in us that makes us both interested in these cases, but also care about the victims, because it's like if we could understand it better, we could maybe understand what the victims went through, what their reality was in these cases. The last thing I want to say is it's like the police saying, everybody says, that it can just be somebody who saw something, heard something, remembers something. It can be the smallest thing that can actually blow a case wide open, literally. I mean, think about the guy in the mobile home who's just driving around with this little dash cam going on. I love that you can see forward, but you can also see back, and he's just kind of just bouncing around in his thing. But he, by having that, and his wife actually, who remembered seeing that van, were the ones who made this possible for Gabby's remains to be found and brought to the FBI and ultimately back to her family. So, it's all, if anybody was in any of those areas, of course, just have to really think hard. Like the people at the restaurant, what else could they have heard, or did somebody whip out their video camera, or anywhere else? Everybody should check their video footage and just see if there's anything that could bump this ahead a little bit, because sometimes that's all it needs and could be discovered. Because as I said in my last video, I don't believe that capturing Brian Laundrie will actually explain much more. He's not going to be open about it. I think what the FBI can find out about it, and local law enforcement, county, city, I think they're the ones who can actually find out more about it just by retracing steps and data mining and all that. But Laundrie's not going to be it. I don't think so. But we all want to see him captured because of, not answering questions and running away and doing all that, and for what we all believe probably happened. So have a good night, and talk to you soon.